Hi, everyone. You're listening to the Engineering Politics Podcast. Today I'm going to be talking with Truman of Return to Reason about why we both voted for Trump in the 2020 presidential election, even though neither of us voted for him in 2016. We both explain what changed our minds going into this election cycle, and what the future might hold depending on who wins. And as I've said in previous podcasts, these long-form discussions will have no bonus content at the end, but I would still appreciate you joining and subscribing to the Engineering Politics Locals community. You can go to engineeringpolitics.locals.com and become a member for free, or get a subscriber pass for as little as $2 per month. And you can use promo code EPFREE for a 3-month free trial of the subscription pass. That's spelled EPFREE, no spaces. I'll go over more of where you can find me and support this content after the show. Also, make sure to show some support for Truman of Return to Reason. You can find Truman and join his locals community at returntoreason.locals.com. If you like the Engineering Politics Locals community, you will love the Return to Reason Locals community too, so go check them out. And we will also be hosting a special election night event covering all the election results as they come in. We will also be talking about all the election victories and losses as the election night surprises unfold. And we'll be bringing on different guests on the show throughout the night. This will all be live streamed on YouTube, but you'll have to join the Engineering Politics Locals community for the stream link and more details. I hope to see you there. Alright, let's get this started. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good to see you. As we're recording this, cheers. It is Halloween night as we are recording this. And one of the last nights before the apocalypse starts. Usually, this is the Day of the Dead and All Hallows Eve and stuff. And really, it's filled, this is the calm before the storm. So Kevin and I thought it'd be interesting to make a video just talking about like voting and kind of how we voted and where we come from in that. And so Kevin, why don't you start off just with kind of like where you have been historically, where you were in 2016, and a little bit on where you're at now, and then I'll do the same, and then we can kind of dig into some of that progression. How's that sound?
That's great.
That way it'll buy me some time to eat more of this candy that it was funny. My wife and I were divvying it up earlier. Cause I was like, man, I'm hungry. Oh yeah, we have that Halloween candy. And she's like, yeah, that's the benefit of going with the 1.5-year-old. So anyway, I can eat some Smarties while you're going.
Nice. So I actually think it's important what you bring up right there is understanding your history, because evaluating something in a snapshot in time is not really helpful. You have to look at the trend, where it came from, where is it now, to where it's going, in order to really understand this thing fully. And I think it's very important for having this complex system like government to understand like where people are moving towards, what are the political trends that you're seeing. And I can find this a lot in myself. I was too young to vote for Obama, I believe, in the first term. His second term, I didn't end up voting because I just wasn't very political, which is something I really advocate for. If you don't know things, don't feel like you have to vote just because you feel like it's something you must do. I'm very much against that message. I don't care if you want to vote. I'm not saying you ought not to vote, but if you're not informed and you really like, I'm just going to go based on the last commercial I've seen, it's almost better that you don't vote, because if you're not going to be informed, an uninformed opinion in the system is worse than no opinion at all, is what I agree. Think. And if this is if this is a slight you think is against you, and you're saying you're just advocating for people not to vote. No, I'm advocating for people to be informed. The more you're informed, the better you can vote. And also the better that your evolution will go. Again, like we're talking about trends, is like I changed because I had to have more of a political evolution, and I understood where I came from. How my parents voted was an important thing. Understanding, they kind of talked a bit about politics, the table, and I didn't really understand where they came from, but I understood, the names they were saying. And now it's like, okay, I understand why you voted that way. I can kind of take some of that information in and then start making my own decisions as I grow. So all this to say, I didn't vote when Obama was against Romney. I believe it was his second term. His second run. In 2016, although I was a registered Republican, I didn't vote for anyone either, and that is because a gun to my head, had to vote. I would have voted for Trump, but I didn't have a gun to my head. I also believed, like I do now, I don't have to vote. To me, that's kind of a vote in and of itself, but I didn't take it in the way that's a no vote for Trump is a vote for Hillary, because you can just reverse that around and say no vote for Hillary is a vote for Trump. And I think that logic is kind of stupid. But I refused to vote back then because, as someone who at that time I probably would describe myself as a conservative, I was so much about the principles of the person. Like, did this person have a conservative temperament? Mitt Romney was a great example of someone who had a very conservative temperament. John McCain is an example of someone who had a great conservative temperament. George Bush was an example of that as well. And when you keep falling around these personalities, it's like, okay, and I'm going to vote for this certain temperament, but that doesn't really tell you what they're going to get done. That doesn't tell you their political convictions. And what I've found between then and now is people that can show off as this certain type of person and say they're very principled, are not very principled when they show that they're just going to shut down when things get too hard.
Like Romney.
When the media, perfect example, when the media is not on their side, they're going to kind of sell out to kind of make sure that they don't fail politically or they can get voted back in. All these different factors that allow them to kind of vacate principle for a short term in order to get whatever political needs they need to get done, and then go back to it when it's convenient. Now in 2020, I'm voting for, what are my conservative principles? I want to conserve founding principle, where I see progressives as people who want to transcend founding principle. And I think that's a definition that a progressive would agree with as well. I think they need to transcend some of these old beliefs and they want to move to something a bit better, where I think the principles that got us to this point are something we need to conserve, principles of free speech and individual liberty, religious freedom, these kinds of things, and the family. It's something that is so important and vital for America to stay America. And I mean, vital for the rest of the world is if America does not remain America, I think the world is going to shift with it. So I don't think it's going to be a good thing if we, do a huge political and really principled shift. So now in 2020, I'm going to vote based on principle. And right now, I think the person standing up for my principles most, although not perfect, it's hard to find someone who's perfectly aligned with everything you believe, but based on a principled stand in terms of founding principle, Donald Trump, is my guy in 2020. Already voted. I have my sticker somewhere right here. And, I'm open a Trump supporter, I guess you could say. I don't really like using the term supporter because I criticize him when he does dumb stuff, which is very often. But it's something that, I think he's a lot closer to conserving the principles, the founding principles of this country, as opposed to the other side, which are kind of open rebellion against those principles. So 2016 didn't vote at all, although, I tell everyone that I tell who, when I say I don't vote, I didn't vote, that was a big mistake. As a voter, it's significantly more important for you to vote down ballot for local government than it is for president. I know a lot of people that say it's like, if you're going to give your money to a political campaign, you have, Mr. Trump wants your money, or your local, state legislator wants your money. Give it to the state legislator.
Yep.
They're the ones who are going to be affecting your life. You really want to be involved with local politics and kind of understand, because those are the people who are going to be changing your life. The president shouldn't be touching your life. And I'm talking about, there's that Gallup poll, I believe it was 56% or so people say their life has gotten better because of Trump, or I don't know how they worded the question.
The question was, is your life better now than it was 4 years ago?
Okay, so that's actually a good question. Then that's different than I thought it was. But if someone was going to pose that question to me saying, did President Trump make your life better than it was before? Whether that question is yes or no, both are bad answers. I don't want him to make my life better. I don't want him to make it worse. If Trump is not in my life at all, the only reason I hear about his name is because of some crazy, dumb report that MSNBC is pushing or something like that. Whatever, I'll leave it to them. But he's not. I don't want the president to affect my life in such a profound way that I need to know every little policy he does. So, when it comes to voting, vote for local government. That's the most important thing in your life. Obviously, I'm going to say get out there and vote for president too, but never abstain for voting if it's just for a presidential thing. Understand how local government works. And so I always advocate for someone to vote if they're going to be voting for local government. Again, if you're not informed, don't feel like you have to vote. But again, 2020 voting for Trump. And I can tell you when I switched, my mode of thinking for not voting for Trump, not supporting Trump to now voting for him. And it was between his election victory in November of 2016 to his inauguration in 2017. Between those two periods, I became like, okay, I'm going to vote for Trump, in 2020, depending on what happens. Obviously, I can change my mind, if something crazy happens between now and then. But it was because of the media effectively trying to impeach him before he ever sat in the White House.
Yep.
That is what convinced me. I'm like, okay, this is effectively, a metaphorical war against a very dishonest media class that is trying to reverse the people's opinion, reverse the people's vote by painting this guy as this evil person who's already a dictator, even though he's never taken power yet. And so at that point, I was like, okay, this seems like I'm going to be open myself up to not worrying so much about the person. We're all imperfect vessels of something. So it's to me, it was like, okay, is he going to stand up for my principles? Is he going to allow me to maintain my freedom? And I think he's the guy for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's interesting about this is, the really radically different pathways that we've taken on this journey. And even just to the right now, the kind of the way we conceptualize this, like when I hear what you say about, Trump embodying certain principles and stuff, none of that really resonates with me, but nor do I find that to be the most pressing thing right now. But we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, for me, most people know I voted Democrat my entire life. Obama, both times we were able to, because I was a poli-sci major. So, we got extra credit for doing different stuff. And so I was more than happy to, put up posters for Obama and stuff like that in my dorms. And thought it was awesome whenever he got voted in. I thought it was cool to, vote for the first Black president. And, the dude just seemed like a cool guy, to be honest. I mean, whatever you say about Obama, I think he is very smug. I think that he's condescending. I think he probably in some ways has a bit of a messiah complex, but the dude is also pretty cool. I mean, think about whenever he was on like Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis, and when Zach Galifianakis asked him, "What's it like to be the last Black president?" and he's like, "What's it like to be talking to the last president you'll ever speak to," or something like that. But anyway, and then there was like a plug for the Affordable Care Act or something. But the guy was, anyway, he's very naturally charismatic, probably one of the most talented politicians we'll ever see in our lifetime, easily. And then voted for him in 2012 also. And, in 2008, even, I remember there was good friends of mine that had like McCain signs in their yard that were veterans even. And that I was like, I honestly am pretty embarrassed by the way I treated people that once I found out that they were conservative, because my understanding was like, so like just that kind of cookie cutter default settings kind of thing that Bridget Fetisi talks about, that I just thought that the only like, wait, I didn't know you were a bad person. Like how did this happen? Really, it really was like that. And so, and even like in 2016, there were like, even at the very beginning of that, when the primaries and both sides are figuring out who their nominee is going to be. And there were friends of mine that were like, "What do you think about that? Donald Trump?" And I was like, "That this is a clown. Why would anyone take this person seriously? Why would anyone support this guy? He's there right now for the novelty effect. Once the novelty wears off, people will realize they want a serious politician, and they'll gravitate to Jeb Bush or Ted Cruz or something." But either way, I liked Bernie Sanders. I have a feel the burn button still. And I still get texts from moveon.org, which was because I think I actually donated to his campaign. And anyway, and even whenever he didn't get the nomination, which I was simultaneously like rooting for one establishment and rooting against the other. Because I was rooting for the Republican establishment to stop this tour de force that was Donald Trump, this hurricane of chaos. And, I'm like, maybe Kasich will take it in Ohio. Like there's all these, like, maybe it'll be a brokered convention. There's all this talk of how they're going to stop this guy, and they never did. And I was rooting against the Democrat establishment. I'm like, what's going on here? Debbie Wasserman Schultz is treating Bernie Sanders atrociously. I'm watching Young Turks, and, whenever he didn't get it, I still voted for Clinton, but I was not happy about it. And for me, I've always been a person that, a little bit contrarian, and I was very argumentative whenever I was younger. And as a result of that, like even, here's one example of just how, kind of out there in terms of just, I liked to try and win arguments. Like I got like super into apologetics before I was ever even a Christian or anything, just because I thought it was fun to argue with people about things that they didn't know what they're talking about. So I'm like, I'll just learn a lot about a subject and then just pick arguments with people, But the point is that I always, was tried to primarily base things on my understanding of what I thought was right or true or accurate, because I wanted to have the best arguments. And I've also always had kind of an innate understanding of systems, because as a contrarian and a kid that got in a lot of trouble, I was always able to kind of find the chinks in the armor, of a system, and find a loophole, or a way around, or a way to get away with things and stuff. And so like, I understand how systems work. I understand where, weaknesses are. I understand how to take things to their logical conclusion. And so anyway, the point is that my thinking about things was always very grounded. It turned out I was just really misinformed for a long time. And so after the election, whenever it was obvious that no one knew what the hell they were talking about, like no one knew, like everyone's finding which way is north, right? I just wanted to understand what I had missed, because I wanted the facts, like I wanted to know. And at the same time, I'm hearing the way certain things are covered. I was already starting to kind of question some of the stuff I was hearing in the legacy media, about, what they were even doing during his campaign. Again, I didn't like the guy, and I thought he was too unpredictable. But I would say, okay, proposing a border wall is not racist. Like, what's the argument here? Just things like that. Like I was already kind of clued into some just bizarre attacks against him, like that, for example. And so once it became clear that no one knew what they were talking about, like I just started from scratch. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't trust anyone in the media right now, because they didn't know, no one knew. And so for me, a lot of the last 4 years has been just kind of recalibrating and trying to, figure out, what are the things, what actually is true, like what actually is accurate. Like once you find a few lies that that you've believed for a while or heard repeated, over and over again by sources you trust, you start to go, okay, wait a second, like how do I know what to believe, about these different issues? And so, I really have been very like trying to get away from looking at who do I trust in the media, and trying to think of how can what's a method I can come up with for discerning what's true, where I don't have to rely on this person or this network or this, news broadcast every day to tell me what to believe and how to think about things. But, is there a way that I can just suss it out for myself by finding, how do I find like, through lines of facts and certain things, for example, and sort narrative from, just the bare bones of the story. So anyway, but the more you do that, the more you realize how completely bankrupt, our media complex is. And, you get to where you have to kind of see things for yourself, right? Like you realize that whenever I listen to Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper cover something, they are giving me a lens. They're giving me their perspective on how to think about something. Think about, here's another good example. Parkland, I think, is a good example of how the media talked about Parkland and Nicholas Cruz and, Dana Loesch and what's his name? Marco Rubio, get roasted in this CNN town hall. They get called murderers and all these other things. But I got to where I'm like, if I'm going to have an opinion about something, I really am I want it to be something I have like a firsthand, like I watched the video, I read the transcript, I read the quotes, those kinds of things. And the more you do that, the more you see how dishonestly the media covers a lot of different things, just like, and I was already kind of primed for that with the Bernie Sanders stuff. So anyway, over the last 4 years, for me, a lot of this has not really been about thinking that Donald Trump, represents some principles or anything like that. I do think he has some innate instincts. I think that he does. There, you can map out a rough outline of some kind of belief system and hierarchy of values. I think with him, but it's very hard to pin down. For me, it's more about back to that understanding systems of like, I go back time and time again to a Facebook post I made the day after the election in 2016. And I was looking at how divided we were. I was looking at all the vitriol and the attacks, and people were, mobbing each other and stuff. And I said, those of us who didn't choose this, we still have to share a country with those who did. Like we cannot, be demonizing each other. We need to understand each other. We need to treat our fellow citizens like people, And I just said that this, we have to come together here or else it's only going to get worse. And so even then I was like realizing patterns and what was happening and looking at the trajectory of it going, this can't continue. This is really bad. And that's only continued in that way. And so a lot of what I've been doing is just trying to figure out kind of what's causing it. What are the things that fuel these social divisions? And so for me, it keeps coming back to the media and the way that they operate and their dishonesty. And so I voted for Donald Trump in the presidential election. I actually voted for a few Democrats in local elections because I know them and I know their policies. And I don't know who they're running against. And I'm like, I know what you're wanting to do. You're a single issue person. You're trying to get in to do this one thing that I agree with. You got my vote. That's fine. And so, but for me, the voting for Trump is two things. One is that in going about seeing the man for myself, and watching the rallies and watching the press conference, watching these things and seeing how much he gets taken out of context, you realize that he is nowhere near the devil that they make him out to be, right? They make him out to be this horrible, racist, awful, sociopath, crazy person. And he obviously has his character flaws, and we can talk about those, but he's definitely not that. I mean, he's the idea that, what is it that Scott Adams, says, you don't become Hitler when you're 70, right? Like the idea that this man was a part of mainstream popular culture for the better part of a century and then all of a sudden transformed into this racist Hitler is just a ludicrous proposition from the get-go. So there's that. It's that, I really don't think he's that bad, to be honest. And so there's that. And then the other part is that while I agree with his policies in a lot of cases, and there are a lot of things he's done that I like, for me, it's that I voted for him because in my mind, he has to win because the dishonesty and stuff we've seen in the media and that has been fomenting these social divisions that I was noticing right after the election, then even when I voted for the other candidate, they have to lose. They cannot succeed in what they've been doing for the last 4 years. So, yeah, my ideology has also evolved over the last, 4 years. Like I said, I wanted to understand stuff. So I, been reading a lot, and I have been learning about a lot of topics. It's kind of embarrassing, but one of the simplest ways to describe why I held previous, beliefs and ideas about what was good was that I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Like, I was one of those people that would, say that roads are socialism, or something just moronic like that. So, that's embarrassing in and of itself. But so yeah, I've
We'll have
changed
another
on.
podcast on that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Here's all the ways in which I didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
Oh, road to socialism, not roads are socialism. Mixed up the phrase. Mixed it up.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Missed that Bernie memo.
Yeah. 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 But so, yeah, my policy preferences have certainly changed as I've come to understand things. But at the same time, for me, a lot of it is that Trump is a lot of things, but he is a bulwark against some really, really harmful social pathologies right now. Now, that said, and I'll end it here, and we can talk about, figure out where we want to go from here. That there is, Eric Weinstein has this phrase where he says, I know a country that swallowed a Trump, Clinton to dump, they swallowed a Trump. And his question is, what are they going to swallow to eat the Trump? So there's this progression. So there absolutely, and I have some very serious concerns about the long-term implications of Trumpism, particularly for conservatism. But I have serious concerns about the long-term trajectory of both parties and both ideological sides. But only one of them do I have serious concerns about the short term as well. And so that's one of the other reasons why I voted for him. But it's not one of those things where I'm like, I'm a Republican now or anything like that. It's really, a lot of it for me is that I went from going, Fox News is bad, the Republican Party, can't be trusted, to going, yeah, all legacy media is bad and no political establishment can be trusted. Like, I just added more people to the list of those that I feel this about. Like, I didn't really improve, you know what I mean? So about how I felt about these establishment media and establishment political stuff. So, could I vote for a Democrat in 2024? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why? In 2016, I would have never thought I was having this conversation. So I don't know what kind of hubris would be required for me to think that things couldn't change in 2024 or even 2022, in midterm elections. So, for me, it is about, I guess in some ways, about principles and seeing who represents or which policies represent the principles you want. And also, I think that, people crap all over the lesser of two evils argument, but it's like you're always choosing that in some ways, right? Like, you're always saying, I don't want that. Like, it's okay to say, I'm going to pick this because I don't want that. You know what I mean? So could something happen on the right, which I see as a very real possibility, to be honest, in the next 2, 4, 6, whatever years, that would make me go, I don't want that. That's dangerous. That's scary. We need to, absolutely, of course, because I didn't think I'd be having this conversation. So anyway, but it's interesting because I come from the left and would have never voted for him and didn't. but I did. And you come from the right, would have never voted for him, and you didn't, but now you did. And so here we are. So anyway, so you can go wherever you want with any of those things. But we're now here in the same place.
Yeah. Here we are. Let's drink to that. What I would say with the principles thing is I don't think Trump holds all conservative principles, but I think he's the best chance out of what we have to conserve those principles.
That's fair. Yeah.
So that's what I meant by that. I mean, you can take an example like family values. Does he hold the best family values? Well, he likes his family. I mean, he loves Trump. He puts it all over everything. You could say he loves his family, and no doubt he loves his kids. I'm not trying to accuse him of that, but he's also not gone the typical route of your traditional family unit. So you can say that he's been a bit flimsy on some of that stuff, and hopefully he learned and doing best for his family. But I wouldn't say he's a conservative. I would definitely not say that. And I do share the concerns of the future of conservatism, considering this now force we can call Trumpism, if we want to. It might be consuming that. And I do think there's some leftist tendencies in there, especially when it comes to accusing the other side of being evil rather than just ignorant of the issues. I think that's a problem moving forward. I do have a comment, though, on the lesser of two evils things. My theory behind that is the lesser of two evils dilemma that we have is a function of what I would consider the people's check and balance on an overpowered government and a government that's too large. If the government was as small as it was supposed to be, I mean, sure, elect Kanye as president. Like,
yeah, it doesn't matter.
Cares? Like, the guy is not going to affect my life. Like, maybe he can make some good rap music while he's in the White House, do some material on that. Great. But because this government is so large and it has the ability to affect our lives, the federal government, you look at this through a different lens. You don't look at it as saying, oh, who can I vote in? Who's going to have all this power and do great stuff for me? You look at, oh man, this guy has a lot of power. I don't want this guy to get in. So now you're focused on the other side and saying, I don't want this to happen because I don't want to lose my rights, as opposed to saying, I do want this to happen because I think he's a better fit for the position. So that's why I think it's a natural check and balance. Yeah, it's a natural check and balance that people have in a government that they know is too large. And it's kind of this intuitive American thing where it's very unique in America compared to other places where, we have the constitutional republic and not a strict democracy or a parliamentary system or stuff like that. So I think it's rather unique in our respect. And I think it's just a natural outgrowth of the growth of government we've seen so far.
No, that's good. I like that. Well, so in something you said, there's two thoughts that I had. In when you're first talking about kind of some of your principles and talking about federalism, I mean, it really is fascinating that we've learned whenever you're saying vote for your local politicians, right? I mean, you would think that people would have learned, especially during the COVID stuff, that it really is their local government that has the biggest impact on their life, Now people haven't learned that, but I mean, that's been the case.
Do you think we're far enough away from the issue? I mean, in terms of time to understand if we learned that yet? I mean, the talking heads, obviously, they're not helping the situation. But let's say 2 years down the line, we figure COVID's gone away magically, as President Trump predicted. We're far enough away from that. Do people understand federalism a bit more because of it? Or do you
I would say that they're more likely to understand it the closer they are to it. Because if I understand it, because I look at my state and then I hear the way people like Ben Shapiro or Dave Rubin talked about California every day. And I'm like, I identify with none of that. And I'd hear people, complain about Andrew Cuomo. And I'm like, that's not my reality. So I understood it because I had the contrast. Now, people that live in a lot of these coastal areas and big metropolitan areas, the thing about it is if you're in a big metropolitan area, the way things are reported about like Gavin Newsom or Andrew Cuomo or whatever, you're going to resonate more with that. Like you're just going to assume that's how it is everywhere. Because big metropolitan areas are ran typically the same. And that's also the perspective that's given in the media, which fair enough. but my point is that I think that people, if they were going to learn it, they are going to be most likely to learn it when the examples of it are right in front of their face. When they're hearing about Ron DeSantis in Florida, when Joe Biden is making the contradictory claim, it's not about red states or blue states, but also the red states are evil. So like when the concepts are right in front of their face, I think the farther we are removed from it, the less likely people are to learn that lesson, because they won't have the contrast. They'd be so far removed from it. Things be normalized between the places. But the other thing, and I think this is a thought I just had. We're just kind of riffing. Is I do what let's try to map out what we think, if you're game, what Trumpism is, and then talk about why it's not sustainable, or what our concerns are, or issues might be with it. So if you had to kind of map out how you conceptualize Trump's governing philosophy, or his priorities or his principles, if you were going to try and loosely map those things out, which you only could ever loosely map that out, how would you describe it? Because it's hard to do, I think, and that's one of the
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. I'm trying to pin down because he's a hard ball to quantify. And it's an advantage. I mean, he's talked about this, how that's an advantage in negotiation when people don't know your stance on any given topic at any given time. It's an advantage in terms of, being able to change your negotiation position. It's a disadvantage in being able to vote a certain way and being like, I know he's going to do this. So it's got a special trade-off there. But what concerns me about Trumpism when it starts to absorb, conservatism is what you're conserving. I don't want to conserve a political party. I don't care much for that. I am a registered Republican. I don't label myself as a Republican, although smaller Republican, yes.
Sure.
Political party, not really, because parties change. That's a set of policy positions, and sometimes they remain too rigid and aren't able to get off this policy position, even though they should. They should follow founding principle, and say, does this still follow the principles, that helped create this country, that got us this far? And if we can't keep adopting that, then we got to move on. Something that I disagreed with Trump on that I've now kind of moved is his tariff type stuff. Tariffs, to anyone who knows free market economics, laissez-faire economics, is economically illiterate to use tariffs. It's a tax on the people, and it's actually something in the second debate that someone of stronger wit and more, or say less fatigued cognitive ability than Biden would have been able to catch him on immediately when he said, these were that I think China's paying all these taxes via tariffs. It's like, well, no, the people are paying the taxes. It's always the people who pay for the tariffs. But it was to fight against the basically the monster that China has become, that using their people as a commodity. They're not playing the same game we are. And sometimes you gotta call them out for not playing by the rules, because rules are created not us out of thin air because they seem fun. Rules are created to make sure everyone wants to participate in the game. And when someone just tries to change a rule, I mean, it's someone playing Monopoly and they're the bank dealer and they're sliding bills into their own pocket, under the table. You can't do that and expect people to not call you out for it, or starting to kick you out of the game or penalize you for it. So although it's something that's hard for me as this free market conservative to wrap my head around and really try to be like, okay, maybe it's a good thing, although I have to pay more for certain goods. And it's nice to say like, oh, my purchasing power is more because products are less expensive from China. Okay, all that stuff works great on paper, works great in a computer, but does not work in reality, because we're people, we're not computers. And you have to be able to play the game correctly. You have to well, one, when you kind of expose kind of the more malevolent things that China's doing with their population, then you kind of understand, okay, this is actually immoral to keep doing this. And
Yep.
even though that it's taxing me, it's something that we ought to do. So that's an example of, I guess, what Trumpism got to break, this conservative ideology and the stronghold that we thought free market economics is everything, and everything needs to remain free, even if people aren't playing the game correctly. So that's something I'm thankful for. But the things I'm less thankful for are kind of the dear leader complex, holding this up. And they did the same thing with Obama, frankly, is holding this person up as infallible. And if you argue against him, you're kind of kicked out of the club. I don't like all the people that have been kicked out of the club for the Republicans. The Lincoln Project conservative types, I don't think they left the club. I mean, they voluntarily left. They left their ID card on the table and said, I'm out, but still kind of associate with them as kind of the useful idiots that the Democrats use them as. But there are some people ejected, out of kind of the Republican club just because they criticize Trump. And that's something I definitely want to avoid. I think we need to be able to allow dissent.
Who's an example of that?
I mean, there are people who go in and out. I think Ben Shapiro is someone who was getting ejected for a little bit and then kind of found his way back in because people, he not less critical of Trump, but once he kind of found out, just like me, found out that, he's not going to be this bulwark against conservatism that you thought in 2016, kind of allowed him back in, once he started to speak a little bit nicer about Trump. I don't think he was forced to. I think it was just it happened to happen because Trump's administration is different than I thought it was going to be back in 2016. But off the top of my head, I can't really even think of any good examples. Maybe like Frank Luntz might be a person that is strongly criticized by the kind of Trumpish side of the Republican Party.
I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, I don't know what his position is, but he's been on Shapiro's show, a couple other shows, and he's very critical of Trump, but still very conservative. I believe he'd consider himself conservative. But I mean, my point is, if you're critical of Trump but still want to kind of stay in the camp, it's like you're no longer allowed in there. I think someone now like Ben Sass might be kind of in that category. Justin Amash is kind of in that category, which I have disagreements with Justin Amash, but he's a very principled guy. He does believe in conservative principles, yet is now even claimed an independent because he cannot just stand by because he's very, very critical of Trump. Although I think he may have been far enough to say he should have been impeached, which obviously I don't agree with, but that is what happens when you have kind of what I consider a dear leader complex. Is you're going to start ejecting
personality
people who should not be ejected out, and that's the number one thing that concerns me with more of a Trump-like takeover. Something else that concerns me is I guess the same kind of personality route. I don't believe that you have to have a conservative temperament to govern conservatively. But if we keep fading away from that and just want to start attacking, because Trump's really useful because he is really of the left. I would say he probably started out on the left, learned their strategy, and now use it against him, which is why he's so effective. And I don't want us to think that this is the only tool, this is the only option to have. So now we can't have people who are more conservative like Mike Pence. I think a lot of people who voted for Trump will reject someone like Mike Pence if he was at the top of the ticket. He's not, he can't, he's not a counterpuncher as much as we saw like in Democratic debate, although he didn't have to, didn't have to be a strategy.
But he does know how to do it.
He does.
He is effective.
But, yeah. But he's not going to be, there's not going to be too many thug life videos made on him on YouTube, of him attacking the other side. You know what I mean? Not going to have the hat and blunt in his mouth with sunglasses. I can
That's
never see
really
that,
funny.
But
that's good.
But, people of that sort of demeanor, I don't think they're going to find them as attractive to some of these people. And it's going to hurt when people, again, would rather stay home than vote if they're not going to be pumped up about the guy they're voting for. And not going to be another Trumpian-like figure. That's why I want to kind of get some insight in who would be running in 2024. I know we're looking really far ahead on that question, but is it Trump 2.0? Is it more conservative? And I think it depends on a lot of what happens in this election. Are the Republican Party going to kind of revise if he loses and figure out, okay, maybe this isn't the best strategy, it's not sustainable? Or if he wins, like, okay, this is our archetype. Trump will become an archetype as to who you want coming next, and that kind of concerns.
That'd be a disaster.
And it does the opposite of kind of what I said. Are you conserving your conservative principles, or are you going to try to conserve the man? Are you going to kind of conserve the temperament? And if they change again from conservative principles, conserving founding principles, to now conserving some sort of temperament that they want, a counterpuncher, a guy who can be a bully at times, a guy who can show himself to be sometimes pretty immature, like we saw in the first debate, that concerns me if we start moving there from moving away from principle, conservative founding principle.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Before I get into some of those other concerns, though, I do want to flush out a little bit of the positives, because I do think they're so consistently overlooked that that I just think they're worth mentioning, just on principle, to be honest. Um, like, here's something, like, so I'll say a few things and you tell me if they sound right to you or not, or if, like, do they sound natural? Like, yeah. Or do they raise, does your spidey sense go crazy? I think Donald Trump loves America. I think he loves America.
No spidey sense there. I think that's spot on. And
Yeah.
the guy again, I hate the question, would you want to have a beer with this guy? I don't think that's a good litmus test as to who you want to
No.
vote for president.
No, it's
But
not.
it might be a good litmus test as to, is he a person or a politician? Like, some people are just not, they're not people anymore. They're just politicians. It's like, do you like go home, sit down on the couch, someone takes out your battery and charges it as you just kind of sit there emotionless? Or are you a person who like talks to people, has a good time, willing to
I'm not sure I'd want to have a
things
beer with Trump, by the way, because I really hate self-focused people.
Well, he doesn't drink beer.
That's true. That's true. I forgot he doesn't drink.
That'd be a little boring. But
well, and there's another thing that's good about him. I think he actually has a really good sense of humor. Like,
he's self-deprecating like a lot.
Yeah,
for people who says no one talks more crap about Trump than Trump does.
Yeah, where he's like, "Can you imagine if I drank? Like, you don't want me.
I would be awful."
Yeah, it's so funny. That's good. But to the first point, the reason why that's important, especially with this election, is because there are very few people that were running against him on the Democratic side that I would confidently say, I think that person clearly loves the country, clearly loves America. Tulsi Gabbard, I would say, clearly loves America. And
by loves America, are we talking about like enthused about America, or if they don't love America, they actively hate America? Because I think there's a difference between those two. Kamala Harris, I don't think she hates America, but I don't think she's very enthused about it, right? I don't think
so. That's a fair question. Whenever I say loves America, what I mean is someone who believes in American exceptionalism, that our Constitution is unique, the American experiment is unique, that this country has been, like, for all of its flaws, like, one of the most amazing things to ever happen for the world, that is, like, dedicated to the American people and to the American experiment. Because there are people that I think are dedicated in some ways to, like, systems, but they're not as interested in, like, America. Like, Andrew Yang is someone who I think means well. So, but I wouldn't say Andrew Yang is someone that I look at him and go, that guy oozes like American exceptionalism, because he has some policies that I'm like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. This would destroy America. Right. So, but I think that he means well. Like, I like Andrew Yang, like, as a dude. He's someone I'd have a beer with. And I'd tell him why UBI was a disaster. But anyway, so Donald Trump, I think, loves America. I think that the fact that so I'm going to make a statement, and first I'll make the statement. It is remarkable that he is seeking a second term with all the crap that the media and the Democrat establishment put him through for the last 4 years. Russia and impeachment. He had the Stormy Daniels stuff, which he brought on himself, by the way. But dirty, like, I was looking at something about just his coverage generally has been 92% negative across platforms and only 5% positive. And the positive is like in right-wing source, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think there's something to be said for the fact that he took that and is still fighting. Like, he's out there. I mean, 2 campaign rallies a day, trying to and saying, bring it on. Give me another 4 years of that in the last years of my life. That's pretty remarkable to me. Like, I remember after the first, no, what, or remember, I think it was after the first debate, whenever he announced that they weren't going to negotiate on a stimulus package anymore, and he said that he wasn't going to do it. I texted a few friends of mine and I said, I think he's trying to lose. I think he's actively trying to lose. And I said, and honestly, I'm not sure I would blame him. I wouldn't want to do this for another 4 years. I wouldn't want to spend the last days of my life dealing with this crap, you know? So I think there's something to be said for that. That he, I mean, is he petulant in some ways? Can he be thin-skinned with the media? I'm not sure that that's even the right, like, framing for that. Because if he was inherently thin-skinned, there's no way he would be trying to seek another term. And there's no way that he would be out there. Like, if you watch some of his campaign rallies, they're just having fun, right? You know, and the guy's a total machine. He's relentless. The dude had COVID. He's 74 and he had COVID like a couple weeks ago.
Who'd have thunk the cure for COVID's Diet Coke?
I know, right? And eating crap, Burger King. Like, the man is a machine. So
he's an aberration, although I think it's important to note, like, normal people aren't doing this. There's clearly something, I think, genetically different about him that just, it must be a happenstance that because the type of energy that guy has, again, 2 rallies a day, which would wear out. I mean, it seemed to, I mean, the presidency very clearly weared out Obama pretty early. I mean, the guy visually changed immediately, and it's a stressful job, so I don't blame him for changing. That's not a knock on Obama, but I mean, for a guy Trump's age with not exactly the best habits, the guy's a machine. I mean, it's crazy. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are because of the whole Biden thing and obvious cognitive decline, and there's a lot of YouTube psychologists and doctors who are like, well, Trump has dementia because he forgot he forgot someone's name during the debate, and they're trying to kind of connect that as to the Biden thing. I forgot who it was, but he always ends that if he forgets a name, he always ends with a very bad person. I'm not going to say a very bad. It's like his way to get out, but it's kind of like this adorable, guys are shooting it right now. How is that not charming? It's better than looking directly into the camera and saying, oh, all around the table and your family and all this stuff.
Truths be self-evident that all men and women are the Christian. The thing.
Right. And although I do think there is a bit of charm that Biden has, it's a bit similar. It's just kind of sad to see now. I think when he was more on his A game, he could do that. He seemed like he was a good people person. But like we've discussed many times, he's not the one driving the bus there, which is unfortunate for many reasons. But Trump's a different guy, and the way you kind of refined love for America, that's perfect. That describes Trump, and that does take out a ton of politicians that clearly are not going to see America the same way. They don't think it's a successful experiment as it currently stands. And when you say this is a failed, flawed experiment, and you start to really put down some of the systems that help the everyday people, the police, and
he has good instincts on those things where he hears someone say something about the police and he's like, what are you talking about? Right. Like, I think what's remarkable is for a man who so often, his front of mind is just him just saying crap. What seems to be his spontaneous gut instincts on a lot of things are right. Now, the things he spontaneously might say about things, when he shouldn't be talking, that's another story. But he has certain instincts, like keying in on cancel culture, on critical race theory, on the stuff with the police, on, Biden says something about oil, and he's like, wait a second, that's a big deal. That's a big statement, Joe. Like, you just said you're going to end the oil industry, like he can key in on things that I think he does have good instincts, which are remarkable. I would have never thought that I would have said that or thought that, but I just think that he,
we'll edit it out.
Huh? We'll edit it
We'll
out.
edit it out.
Yeah, but I think that it's clearly true, and it's funny that I'm saying all these things on the end of whenever you're talking about like this dear leader complex. I don't have that. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of things that I um, aren't just surface level criticisms. I have deeper than surface level criticisms of him and the implications of his presidency, but you cannot not be impressed with some of these other things. The fact that he is willing to stand up against, here's another one. He clearly, in some ways, I don't know how to conceptualize, because I've heard people say that he is brave, and I don't think that's right, because there's times whenever you can tell he's just kind of putting his finger to the wind to try and figure out how to feel about a thing, what to say about a thing. So I don't think he's necessarily brave, but he does have a certain kind of courage, right? Think about what has been going on in this country for the last 6-7 months. And during all this like heightened racial tensions, he comes out and says, we're getting rid of this critical race theory crap. This is racist. This stuff is not anti-racist. It's racist. We're not going to do it in our government trainings. We're not going to do it in any contractors who want to do anything with us. We're not doing this. This is garbage. That takes enormous stones to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And it's
especially
unique
during that time.
And it's hard to find a good name for it, because take someone like McCain, for example. Are we going to accuse him of not being a courageous person?
Absolutely not.
There's
No,
not a person,
no.
in this world who would accuse him of that, who's not going to be extraordinarily dishonest.
And there's an example of Trump's petulance, by the way.
Yeah,
disparaging John McCain as like not a hero. Oh, heroes don't get caught. That would be an example of something that I don't think is just surface level. There's something messed up about you as a person if you don't calibrate that as like, that's too far. You don't like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, most people know not to say certain things, and he has some things that he doesn't know not to say. Anyway, sorry, go on.
No, perfect. 2 birds, 1 stone. Great. But my point here is a very courageous man by all objective standards. If McCain, assume obviously he's alive today in good health, everything like that, he's president, do you think he would go against critical race theory with the current conditions we have now?
No.
There's no chance. There's 0 chance it would have happened. Although I believe that he would believe it's a bad thing. He's a smart guy. I don't think he would think this is a good thing, but I think he would reason his way into being like,
moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That took steps.
Yeah.
McCain wouldn't do that. So there's a weird, it's not courage, but it is
it's political courage. It's willing to step on your own convictions career
on the few things you have convictions on. Maybe that's what it is. There's a lot of things he doesn't have convictions on, and that's why he's a populist. But the few things he does have convictions on, he's like, I'm going to do what I think is right here, and I don't care what you think.
Yeah, but there's several instances of Trump doing dumb things and doing courageous things that are political suicide for everyone. That wasn't for him, not because he's a special person, but because he just did it and moved on. He's like, you're dumb, you're fake news, I'm moving on. Like, I don't really care what you got to say. Where the train's moving, left the station. So I think that's something very unique to him. And I think it's a bit of confidence. He's not relying on his political career like Joe Biden is to stay alive. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Metaphorically, not literally, but
But
I mean, that is his life. Joe Biden has been in office or some sort of political office for 47 years. What happens when he leaves? I mean, I know he's got some stuff that might be lined up, but Trump's made his claim. Trump's had his name spread all over things. He's been in magazines. He's been in rap videos.
It's
He's done
cost
all
him
these
money
things.
to do this.
For
That's
sure.
what's fascinating is that the left tries to simultaneously make the argument that he's became president to enrich himself and enrich his friends. And then these tax returns come out and they're like, oh, he's lost all this money. It's like, yeah, obviously he's lost all this money. So did his family lost all this money. His Ivanka had to dissolve businesses that she had. They had to like, I don't know if you watched the Sunday special with Jared Kushner when he's like, we had to sit down with a, what was it, the type of attorney, a conflict of interest or something, attorney and say, tell us all the things we have to do. And he's like, and you can tell that there was multiple times Jared Kushner made statements like, this isn't what I expected to be doing. This is not very convenient. I was making a lot more money. Like you can tell that he was not real thrilled to be pulled into public service, you know, but they're doing it. And so whatever you think about them, just on a pure fact level, it's like, okay, if they're enriching themselves, how? Like, but there is the other part of what you said where it's like, you know, he's already done those things. He's not like sitting here going, my career will be over, right? Like,
and that's the insane part to me is like people are like, they always argue against how he's a career politician, but if he is not a career politician, you can't vote for him because he wasn't a career politician. Both hate career politicians.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this very dishonest conversation we have, and we try to throw this veil of must be in politics in order to be in politics, except for, you know, when they're not coming from politics, they're not beholden to anything, nor is their lifeline directly tied to their political position. So if anything, it's like, no, we should almost exclusively be having people who are not politicians jump into politics. And even like the cabinet positions of like, oh, lifelong person who's worked in the industry is now regulating the industry. It's like, duh. Yeah. The person who knows the most because they've been in the private sector in that industry can certainly hop into
what
the
you don't want
sector.
is the opposite, when the person goes from government into the private sector and get that regulatory capture thing going. Anyway, the other thing was a chair. The other thing was I was thinking about this. Gosh, I was thinking about it wasn't impeachment. I can't remember. About oh no, the other thing about him, I've heard Ben Shapiro and others criticize. They say that he watches too much TV or he watches the news too much and yada yada, and how that clearly he watches all these different things like Morning Joe and he watches all these programs. And you know, is there a substance to the fact that, you know, the president probably has other things to be doing than watch those shows? Sure. At the same time, whenever I hear that, I key into, there's a reason why I watch and consume a lot of the news that I think that a regular low information diet person watches and consumes, is because I want to know what they're thinking about things, what is informing their opinions, and I want to be able to speak to those things. So when you hear him say, I watched this thing that a lot of other people probably watched, and this is how, like, he's able to reframe their previous understanding of something that they consumed was, because he's not just addressing the network. He's not just saying CNN is fake news. He's saying, I watched your interview with this person. I watched the questions you asked. I heard you ask this question, and that's a bogus, stupid question. Like, and so he's able to reframe and key into what the average person and voter is thinking about and experiencing. And so that I think that makes him a lot more in tune with like what, you know what I'm saying? Like what the average American person is watching it. And it's also not just Fox News, right? Like he clearly does watch a lot of Fox News. Like Fox and Friends is a thing that he likes to watch, I guess, because I hear people talk about how he calls in or he tweet, you know, something like that. And lately he likes that OAN. So he likes people that stroke his ego. Yeah, I get that. But he is obviously also watching networks that he knows are actively spreading misinformation about him, but it makes him able to address that. And so I think that speaks to the broader thing of the way that he has handled the news media, you know, which I did not, I mean, I'm an example of someone that did not know that the news media was a problem until this guy became president. Right. And so like, there is, again, there is something to be said for the fact that he has raised so much. I mean, I think it was like a year or so ago, there was a poll that was, who do you have more trust in? And it was like the news media, all these other things. And out of all these groups, like the news media were the ones that people trusted the least. CNN and Fox News and MSNBC, people trusted them less than they trusted Donald Trump or any Democrat or anything like that. So I think that it's been a good thing for him to help expose the rot. I mean, going back to one of my original points of like, they can't be allowed to succeed. He accelerated a lot of the things they were doing, and he revealed a lot of things they were doing. But I think in doing that, he's helped raise attention and draw attention to something I think that a lot of people probably wouldn't have otherwise known about. Like, I would not have known how, like, morally and intellectually bankrupt NPR is if it weren't for, kind of tangentially what's happened over the last 4 years. Same with CNN. I never watched MSNBC. I just always viewed like MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN, and like NPR and NBC being in the middle, right? That was the framing that I had. So I think that's another good thing that he has done. Anyway, those are just a few of the things where I think that it's important to kind of map out, what he has done, what is Trumpism, what are some of the guiding, kind of principles there, I think. And then, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Then I'd like to get into some of the concerns that I have personally.
Yeah. Going back to him watching, daytime television. I mean, you talk about the guy who's closer to the people. He's got some of the habits the people have. So that's kind of better. I mean, it's kind of refreshing in a way. I think, people like Ben Shapiro criticize him when he's just mimicking talking points from the, Fox and Friends earlier that day and just starts tweeting it out. And, when he gets on the Twitter machine, can get sort of hilarious. But I mean, that's something. I don't love what he does, but something that conservatives are not good at, although they're pretty good at managing these companies and bringing this innovation to the forefront, or bringing this innovation out to everyone. They're not very good at adopting it. And with a conservative mentality, you're slow to get and utilize some of these newer systems. And I don't know if he wouldn't come around with the next Republican, or would all of these Republicans, running in the Senate and Congress and state legislatures, would they be using Twitter effectively? I mean, Twitter is not an awesome example of all the great things can happen on the internet, but
Probably
it is
not.
a way to communicate to the people.
And Ted Cruz has a great Twitter.
Yeah. But it was an effective, and he might have won the election because of Twitter, not because of Twitter, the company, but because of his platform on Twitter, being able to talk directly to the people.
Yep.
And that's something that I don't think your everyday conservative would have considered doing unless Trump came around and did it first. So that's a good example of something that they can adopt in the future. That isn't something that's going to destroy conservatism, but at least get their opinion out there directly to the people. So I think that's something that, if you can call it Trumpism, I guess, being more brash about what you think and wanting to talk directly to the American people, not doing the politics thing, looking in the camera and talking about random nonsense, trying to relate. It's like watching a computer try to relate to a person. It's like a kind of that, if you ever have those old soundboards of the computer voice talking to you, trying to have a conversation with you because it's like a computer pretending to be a person. That's how it feels like when politicians talk to you sometimes.
Quite often.
Yeah. And so can Trumpism, I guess, if we want to call it that, help more conservative leaning politicians become less stiff, act more like people? I think it can. Yep. Like, just like anything else, any movement that's good or bad, you can always learn from it. And it would be a mistake not learning from it. Although I think it would be a mistake adopting everything from it as well. So only the future can tell what conservatives are going to do with what you can learn from a Trump presidency. I don't think you should adopt it all. I don't think you should scrap it all. You got to learn from it, and hopefully they can move forward, becoming an actual relevant party rather than fading away.
Right. Well, there's, by the way, that Twitter thing is also an example of a place where he had good instincts.
Hmm.
Like, it's not just that he thought to do it, but he thought to do it and he went, that would be effective, right? Like he leaned into it. So anyway, so one of the main concerns I have about it, and a little bit, I think we talked about this, when I called you last week, but um, is populism is inherently not tethered to principle. Populism is inherently tethered to the ebbs and flows of the people, um, and I feel like we already have a party that is kind of that. Like I think the left is kind of that, but at the same time, the left does have some guiding principles. Now, how they enact those, I think, has changed. But if you're to take something like justice or equality, or really they say equity now, or fighting oppression, or those kinds of things, fairness. They do have some buzzwords that they are kind of more themselves to, even if they, have really oftentimes distorted or perverse ways that they might act on those things. They at least do have some things they kind of rally around. Um, and, you know, if the right does fully lean into Trumpism, from a populist standpoint, and they, say, well, they adopt some kind of vague, America first kind of thing or something like that, and the rest of it's just what sounds good or gets the people excited. There's a lot of dangers there because people are generally stupid and people can generally be riled up into a lot of different things. And so if you don't have some guiding principles that kind of undergird what you're wanting to do, I think that you run the risk of getting caught up in some really bad movements. One of the examples I give, and I said this, I don't know, a couple of years ago actually, was that there is a danger that the next person that comes around and acts like the next Trump and presents himself as the next Trump, kind of like how conservatives have done with Reagan for a while, right? It was very Reagan-esque. Reagan was always a litmus test. That if Trump becomes that, which I think there's a good chance that he might in a lot of ways, you could have someone who exploits that and is very much is the fascist, crazy person that the left thinks he is. And they will be immune to all of those criticisms. They'll say, yeah, they said that about Trump. I'm not that guy, you know. And if you're not moored to any principles, you might allow, the water to slowly be turned up. I think you have the same risk on the left for someone, I think the best candidate right now for this is AOC, but someone who, you know, echoes Bernie Sanders' rhetoric but isn't actually, or Bernie Sanders is not a communist dictator. He has, crazy beliefs in a lot of ways, but I think that Bernie Sanders is genuinely a good guy. I really like him um, as a person, I think in a lot of ways. But you could have someone who really is the, you know, communist, authoritarian
Well, the biggest
dictator.
problem I'd say with him, although I disagree with you whether he's a good guy or not. I don't think he's a particularly good guy, but I think the biggest
I
problem with
think he
him,
means well, but
yeah,
the way he acts on that is bad in a lot of ways.
yeah,
But I just don't think
yeah,
I don't think he's malevolent.
yeah, yeah, I could agree to that. But the biggest problem with him is he leaves it open for the next guy. And that's the biggest
Mm-hmm.
problem with his form of government. And just to hit up on populism real fast, populism, I think populism can work while constrained in some sort of principle, but it's difficult to do. And it's not particularly successful, I don't think. populism is not exclusive to the left, but I think it's a main feature of the left.
Yeah,
Democracy, a Democrat. I mean, to be a democracy is mob rule. Populism, in a way, is basically mob rule. It's whatever the most popular thing is, right? So I think these two have a very direct relationship with each other, which it can be done on the left, and yes, that is a big problem with the a populist movement on the right. And something that, America First is kind of that nationalist thing. I know we're scared of the nationalist word because of those darn Germans, but I do. There's a big difference between ethno-nationalism and nationalism. Nationalism is not inherently a bad thing. It's also not
no,
inherently a good thing. I think people conflate patriotism and nationalism. The big difference, there's a difference because there's no such thing as a patriotic law, as a patriotic bill. There is a nationalist bill, a nationalist law. There are two different things, although they sound similar. And as a spectrum of nationalism to globalism, we all should probably be more on the nationalist side. Would make more sense.
totally.
But to make that a mainstay in only America and start to insulate ourselves is also not a good thing. So that is a fear if we start to get pushed that direction on the Republican Party and they start to bring out a true nationalist. Someone who's more of a hearted nationalist, or
Well,
someone like though it's a guy from Breitbart. He needs to go to jail. Shapiro hates him. Uh, he was very influential. I think Steve Bannon. There we go. Steve Bannon. He's someone of a nationalist populist. That one is a bit more scary, when you start to kind of go what's popular on the more than the far nationalist end, that's when you get a bit more scary, and that's a concerning part if the Republican would go that direction.
yeah, I mean that's my point. Is that the thing that keeps you from doing that is having clearly outlined principles
Mm-hmm.
that pull you back from, you know, from the abyss if you start to go down a crazy road, right? So if you have a few things, they're kind of serving as your North Star where you can go, okay, it's kind of like having a mission statement in a lot of ways. One of the benefits of any organization of the mission statement is at any given time, they can look at it and go, okay, how am I doing at that? Right. And so having some guiding principles to filter your organization through, or, just you as a person that you can point at and go, okay, how am I doing at that? I think are vital to keep you from going down those roads. And so that's where I say that if there is no principles, and again, I'm not talking about ones that they would pay lip service to on the right, like fiscal responsibility. Okay. No one who's paying attention buys that. Like that's just clearly not part of the deal, on the right. I'm not even sure that limited government is part of that. I think there is something to the argument that the left makes of the right, where they say you're not against big government, you're just against the big government that you don't like. So they'll say you want to blow out the spending in this and this and this, and you want to cut it here. So you like big government. It's just whenever it's funding your, pet projects. I think there's probably something to that. So anyway,
Yeah, I would say there's a difference there a little bit, and I think the Democrats want to grow the federal government. The fiscal responsibility point's spot on. Yeah, spot on. And I think it's awful that the right has gone that way, and I really hope that it turns itself around. And it did not, and has not under Trump, unfortunately. But when it comes to the size of government, Republicans at least want to maintain federalism. I mean, that's something Trump has shown
sure.
great restraint. I think
Yeah.
that is actually my biggest thing is during the coronavirus, the country is served up on a platter to him. He
Yep.
could have taken the most power since we've seen a president take since FDR. I mean,
Yep.
easily, very easily, because the
I would say
Democrats were
actually
effectively
since Lincoln put the Constitution under the rug and said, we're going to get back to that when this thing's over.
yeah.
And I think that he could have done that.
Yeah. Well, he could have done that, but not only could he, the Democrats were asking him to do that.
Totally.
And if he
Yep.
would have done that, they would have crucified him for doing that.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's an example of extraordinary dishonesty on their end. And when I told you I was going to make a voting video or talk about it, that was one of my main points there. It's like, you can't you can't blame him for all these things and say what he could have done. But if he would have done it, you would have completely
then he's a fascist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd have made him you'd have made him into the imaginary dragon you're fighting in your head. And that's what they want. Yeah. Unfortunately, they do want him to do bad things because they want to take him down.
There are certain people on the left who would get a certain amount of delight in encountering a Nazi in real life so they could prove themselves the hero they think themselves as. The same way that there are a certain amount of people on the right who would love to encounter a real life communist, revolt so they could prove themselves the hero that they imagine themselves as. But yeah, so that's, what you said there is spot on. He didn't do it, but the problem is that we don't know why. You know what I mean? So if we knew that he had a certain set of principles he was tethered to, we would say, of course, Trump's not going to do that. He has these principles. And as a person that we know is tethered to those principles, of course, he's not going to do that. As it stands, I don't know why he didn't do that. I think he just didn't want to.
I think he's got no interest in grabbing more power.
Right.
Going back to what we talked about before, but that is the why, I think. Yep. Going back to what we talked about before, he's not relying on his political career to make his name go in the record book.
Sure.
Done and done. Like, it's already done.
But what that implies is that in another set of circumstances, if he didn't have that other thing waiting for him, he might have weighed those options.
Yeah. Different life circumstances might have changed his worldview quite a bit. So.
That's all I'm saying is that without something you can point to, we have to speculate. And I think you're right, by the way. I think you're right. He didn't want to do that because it wouldn't really gain him anything. The problem is, what if he would have felt a different way? Maybe, you know what I'm saying? So we just don't know without that set of guiding principles. And so that's why I am very worried about having both parties, both sides of the spectrum, just completely detach from any, objective, principles in morality or integrity or anything like that. Not that I think, either of them are super, moored to those things, but I'm saying, like, without it even being part of the conversation is real danger, because then it just becomes that that postmodernist just power. It's just all about power. It's not about fulfilling any of these ethical responsibilities or serving something outside of ourselves. It's just about power for our team.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a good example of this. It was in a conversation we had a while ago, and it was not something I don't think related to this, but it's you constrict yourselves kind of to your principles, but we are finding out that this politics is becoming a sport. It's a team game now, right? You're rooting for your team. You're out there, you're playing a football game. You all know the rules. Can't go off sides, can't false start, can't do all these things. What happens when the players brings a gun into the game, starts shooting the other guy? It's like, okay, we have now untethered ourselves from principle, untethered ourselves from rule. Now it's going to be mass chaos where none of it's going to be good from either side. It's just not going to end well.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. And so, I could see a world, just this literally just came to my mind, where if the right did try to, recalibrate to something a little bit more traditionally conservative, after Trump is gone, and then they experience this massive, depression of voter turnout because, people are all looking for someone to lead them, and then they go looking for someone like him. I think that if you go looking for it and it doesn't organically happen, you're going to find the wrong person. You might not know it until it's too late, but you're going to find the wrong person if you go looking for someone to lead you like, Trump. And so, there's just so many scenarios in the long term that I think are really, really scary. Again, I see that on the left. The left, back to what I was talking about, like, was seeing systems and trajectories and seeing kind of how things play out. These are all question marks in terms of the path that the right could take after this. And it's important to discuss those the problem is that with the left, it's not question marks anymore. Like the question mark is, will they fix this? Because we know where it is right now is remarkably dangerous for the future. I mean, what did I disagreed with the example that he was using this, but in that Andrew Sullivan, Sam Harris interview, Sullivan said, we're potentially looking at an extinction level event for, Western democracy. And he was talking about Trump as this existential threat boogeyman, whatever. But, I do think there's something to the idea that if the modern left and what it's been captured by, really, I'm not talking about establishment Democrats. Because establishment Democrats are the shell. And they, the eventual takeover that we've talked about, with the hierarchy flip and then the hierarchy within the hierarchy. That if you have Ibram X. Kendi with a Office of Anti-Racism cabinet position, that's an extinction level event for Western democracy. That's we're done. And so, whereas these question marks for where the right, will go after Trump, whenever that is, whether it's 2024 or 2020 or sometime in between, if they, successfully impeach him or something like that, whatever. Those are question marks, but we do know we can actually pretty successfully map the trajectory of the left right now. And that's one of the things that why both of us find ourselves in this squirrely situation where we're supporting or at least voted for Donald Trump, because what other option is there, when we're facing down, potential Treasury Secretary or something, Elizabeth Warren, whose financial advisor was Gabriel Zuckman, who wants to, I think I told you about the equity economics or whatever, the crazy crap that paper he wrote. And the guy isn't just about wealth taxes, but, state-run TV and suppressing innovation that won't have equitable distribution, and getting rid of voter ID and voter registration. And, he's the guy who said the problem with charity is that it's not democratic. These rich people think that they can spend their money how they want. It's like, this guy's crazy. And this was who crafted Elizabeth Warren's financial proposals. And we're talking about making her Treasury Secretary. Are you kidding me? And so, or Bernie Sanders, was going to, supposedly in talks to have a cabinet position. It's just, it is so far removed from anything that, I literally, my stomach just at the thought of that was just like, you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach. What other option do we have? Because that cannot happen. That cannot happen.
Yeah. It's scary to think of some of the changes. I mean, just outside of the Ibram X. Kendi stuff, which is unfortunately, people are not getting the information about some of these ideas that you think you would in a free media, right? Free media should be for the people, want to inform the people. You think they'd have the incentive to do so, but it seems like they're incentivized not to. And something like
there's
that,
a free market. I mean, that's the thing, is that they're doing what's profitable. And that's why I think it was you that asked me if I thought that the media was the enemy of the people. And I said, I think the people are the enemy of the people. The media would have to change tomorrow if everyone rejected what their current business model was. They would have to, because they go to business otherwise. So the free media, have responded to where our society is, and I don't know what the answer is to that, but I do blame them. I call them parasites and hacks and, cancerous succubuses for a reason. But, you know, at the same time, I think that if they didn't have the, the profit incentive to be like that, like it's the most viable business model, especially with what they're dealing with having to contend with all this clickbait and all this online, the online space. There was a huge monkey wrench into it. Um, I think if that wasn't there, they wouldn't be like that. And so, like I say about them and like I say about our politicians, they are how they are because we are how we are. And that's why having these principles and why starting locally with, trying to bring some semblance of principle and integrity back to things is the best way to make sure that we don't have to face these options again. Like I don't like the fact that it is I find it to be a true statement that there's that video that Donald Trump, a man versus a movement, that the guy who talks in that video, Tom Klingler, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but Klingler, Stein, and Freud, but
Tom from
said
MySpace. He's the
Tom
same
from
guy.
MySpace, but he says something to the effect that uh, Donald Trump um, is under other circumstances would probably be a bad president. Um, and, perhaps even most other circumstances, and he says, but he's the perfect man for this time. Maybe not even most times, but these times he's the perfect man. I agree with that statement, but I also hate the fact that it's true. So to what I was just saying about us being rooted in principles and integrity, like despite all the things that I think he gets right, there are things about his character that if I had to pick between the perfect man for the time being someone with those defects or without those defects, I'd pick someone without those defects. So I hate that. Like I don't like that that's a true statement that he is the right guy for right now. I would rather the right guy for right now be someone who is able to do these things and also not be a lot of the ways that, also not have an Access Hollywood tape, you know? um, so yeah, like that's what made me think of that is that like, while that is the case, we do have to focus on trying to, and I think it does start locally, trying to bring people back to a place where they are moored in principles, where we filter out people from the right and the left that don't have these certain qualities. So we don't have to be in this situation to begin with. So that we, you know what I mean? And maybe that's a pipe dream and that's me being naive, but I would like that to be the case. That's all. Um, anyway, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think James Lindsay said something similar to that, that he kind of embodies what what we see today. He's just the perfect representative of our culture.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also it does help to understand the culture, to understand how to fight against some of the bad things that are coming out of it.
Sure.
So obviously, I'd much rather have someone who's more grounded in principle, easier to predict. We know why he holds the positions he holds, but sometimes it takes a swamp monster to take down the swamp a little bit, and
I
you know
guess
it's it's what we get. It's political reality, and that's
we get what we
yeah.
deserve. I do think that's right. I think
Mm.
that the situation we have, we do deserve it. And, again, I go back to a lot of this with the media for me because the media, I think, helped create these siloed realities where you can have conversations with people and they'll talk about, how superior Joe Biden's moral fiber is to Donald Trump's. And honestly, that's another thing where I'm like, I'm not sure that I think that's true. I just think that he's an asshole in different ways, you know?
Yeah.
Um, Do I think that he's an asshole in as obvious ways, or is it as prevalent? No. But is it obviously true that he is? Yeah. Yeah. And especially, or has, was, I'm not sure what he is right now. So,
Yeah,
um,
they're similar, I would say. One of the big things that I always see, especially Lincoln Project conservative type guys that are, you know, they want to throw out the documented times Trump has lied 40,000 times, something ridiculous. Like, you want someone like this? I'm like, you know, if I'm going to compare someone who lies about his crowd size during his events compared to someone who tells black people they aren't black if they're not going to vote for him,
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
not that's not really comparable. Even if there's 1,000 of those crowd size type lies, I don't like lying. Really wish you wouldn't do it. But let's not pretend this stuff is the same. Like, I think a lot of stuff that Obama lied about was bad. Like, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Like, there's a difference.
Benghazi.
Yeah, there's a difference
Yeah.
in those types of lies. And although, of course, I prefer no one to lie at all, is that a
Yep.
political reality? Unfortunately, not. Is it a sign of our culture that we have to accept something like this? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is, and it's unfortunate, and it's going to take a cultural shift, and that's what the frustrating thing about me is. We've either taught through education or just maybe it's kind of a movement in social media that we think all the issues we have today are political. And to me, that's
That's so
dangerous.
not.
That's
Yeah.
dangerously wrong.
Because then it
And
makes you
that
think that the solutions are political too.
if we just change the guy in the White House,
Yeah.
all we got to do is change the guy. Like, people who say this is Trump's America. That's why you see all the rioting in the streets. Are you kidding me?
It's
Like,
insane.
that you have to be dishonest to believe that, or be wholly indoctrinated to believe that it is Trump that forced all those riots to happen, and it's not
And it
a
didn't happen under
result of a sick
Obama
culture.
when Michael Brown was shot, or Freddie Gray
Yeah.
or any, what I'm saying? Sandra, like all those
But
things.
even that, but just to show that this is a cultural sickness that we got to work our way through. Is politics making it worse? Yeah, it's making it a lot worse. But you cannot get rid of the cancer by addressing the symptoms only.
Yep.
Like, you have to get to the cancer, and the cancer, unfortunately, it's hard to admit, the cancer is us.
Well, yeah, and it's how we conceptualize. I mean, that's what I wrote about in that thing on riots, of how I think that our assumptions about where, meaning or success or solutions to life's problems come from, I think has really, been distorted in our psyche. So that, like your point was earlier, like, yeah, it shouldn't matter because they shouldn't have, it could be President Kanye, it could be President whoever, so they don't have enough power to do anything. But we've went down this road where people think that this is where all the um, solutions are. And like you said, they think all problems are political problems, and so therefore they're going to think that the solutions are political. So let's get the right guy in or pass the right law, right? Or whatever. And it's just not the case, but that's what happens when it's kind of all you have, right? Then whenever you move away from anything meaningful or anything outside of yourself, all you have is the quest for power. All you have is a quest for my side having power. It really does make sense for that to be the lens of someone who doesn't have any other groundings in anything. So anyway, yeah. Well, we've went for about an hour and a half. So why don't you give me your closing thoughts on um, voting for Trump, and how you feel about that. Uh, I think it's probably a little bit different in your circles as a conservative, but maybe if there's something that, what could happen that would make you regret that or something, I don't know. But just kind of your closing thoughts on this conversation, because I know it's kind of been all over the place, but I think this has actually been really good. But anyway, um,
Yeah, my concern with making a video like this has always been like I'm a conservative voting for a Republican. Like who's gonna listen? Who cares? Like
yeah,
water's wet. Good on you. Um, I think my claim to this is a more interesting conversation is I didn't vote for him in 2016, but still, like not a super compelling argument, not like it's out of this world crazy. I think your story is much more significant than mine. I think someone like James Lindsay, which if any of you watching this have not listened to James Lindsay's, I believe it's titled "Biden is not the room."
yeah, Biden's not the
Awesome,
room. Yeah,
awesome explanation of someone whom I thought was basically a never Trumper, would never consider
yep,
voting for him, and say I'm voting for him because, again, the he's the person we created, but he might be the perfect person for this time. He's the only one who's willing to fight against some of the awful things we're
yep,
seeing come out of the left, coming out of someone he more identifies with. Um, but in terms of me voting, I went in there. I'm in a pretty liberal place. Only allow two people in this massive room at one time because of COVID policy, stuff like that. Also, we had early voting here, so it wasn't very crowded, but still the feeling of needing to crowd over my paper as I'm like circling these things in,
yeah,
not wanting anyone in this very progressive area to see who I'm voting for because it doesn't fit the far left orthodoxy that controls most of the area I live in,
totally.
is kind of a scary thing to still do that. As someone who's very openly political, even in my daily life, if you know me personally, you know my political leanings. I like talking about the topic, and I enjoy talking about the topic much more with people who disagree with me than agree with me, because I find
Sure.
it to be a more interesting conversation. But I still have this kind of innate instinct to not tell people who I'm voting for, to kind of still kind of put a veil over it and make sure people can't outwardly see that I'm a Trumper and I want to take away everyone's health care and do all these evil things.
Yeah.
So, even when I was in the voting booth, I still kind of found myself like, why am I doing this? Like, why am as someone as openly political as I am, kind of still afraid to show people who I'm willing to vote for. And maybe that kind of played into it in 2016. Maybe it was more I was just too scared to admit that he might have been the best option at the time. Because I was still conservative. At no point in 2016 did I consider voting for Hillary. At no point. So this was not a maybe I like Hillary more than Trump thing. It was no, I don't like either of them. But if someone held a gun to my head and forced me to vote, I'd vote for Trump. And I did thoroughly enjoy election night 2016 because it was fun watching all these people melt on all these objective reporters on all these stations clearly freaking out, not because they predicted things wrong, but because things are not going the way they wanted it to.
Yeah.
That was very telling. And so to go back and still feel insecure about my vote was, a social pressure that I wish we can get rid of. I wish
Yep.
we can start talking to each other like you and I have different ideas. We vote for different people, but that doesn't matter. And we need to try to find our way there. And I don't think sticking with the Trump model for the Republicans is a great way to do that. Obviously, going the route the Democrats are going right now is an awful way to do that, to paint every person who's left of Lenin as an evil Hitlerian figure. We got to find a way to bridge that gap. And although the results of the election, I think we both agree, I don't think it's going to heal much of anything. At least not right away. It's going to
No
take a
matter
lot
how it
of it's going to
goes.
take a lot of time to heal. We got to figure out a way to do it. And I think that's the important part. So if any of you guys listening to this haven't voted yet, if you think you're informed enough, go vote your conscience. If you vote for Biden, you're not going to get flack from someone like me. Well, you might get a little
Yep.
flack, but I'm not going to hate you. You're still an American. You're still, a fellow brother or sister of mine. I find that if you still have conviction to vote for a certain person just because you have different opinions as to how they'll govern or what they can do to help heal the country, do your thing. I'm not trying to
Yep.
discourage anyone to vote for Biden if that's what they want to do. But let's figure out how to kind of bridge the gap between these two sides. How to see someone who votes for someone else because they may have a different set of ideas is not evil, or even coming from the right to the left, not seeing them as an ignorant person, as dumb, as a communist, as someone who just wants to take all your money and stuff like this. You cannot create these imaginary dragons in your head just so you can fight them. And I think you were spot on that, it's some of these people, what I'll call, it's some of their wet dreams that they could have a Nazi to actually show up in real life so they can pretend to punch them, or
because then
have a
justifies the way they've been acting on either side, Nazi or commie, whatever.
Or going out and hoping that, some member of Antifa comes walking in the most, right wing or right wing rural area, just so you can, threaten
I've
them
seen
with
those
your
Facebook
Second
posts where
Amendment
they're
rights.
like, I want them to come here. And it's like, why do you want that? Why do you want to be forced in a situation where you might have to harm a fellow citizen? You shouldn't want that.
What you should want is to convince them to stop doing it. That's what you should want. I would love for someone at Antifa to come over to me so I can talk to them and figure out what's wrong. Maybe I can convince you to not vote for Trump. That's not my goal here, to make you vote for Trump. Vote for Biden. Vote for Bernie if you want to. Write him in. I don't care. But you don't have to harm people's property to do it. You don't have to hate other Americans to do that. And I hope, again, anyone who's listening here who hasn't voted yet, if you feel informed enough, go vote. Either way, I'll like you. And that's really all I have on voting. How about you?
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think that the fact what you were saying about that there's this nervousness about it, that is the problem that has to be confronted. And back to my thing about the media has trained us to hate each other. To think that whoever your ideological opponents are, they're trying to ruin your way of life, or like you said, take healthcare and take all your money and enslave you. That's something I even hear. I mean, I hear it on Fox, and I hear it on MSNBC, and I hear it on CNN, and it's all just about how much the people that disagree with you are your enemy. And it's disgusting. And it just, you mentioned James Lindsay's video. One of the things he says at the end of it, he's talking about the critical race theory stuff. But just this movement that we're seeing more broadly, we cannot empower this. We cannot empower the people whose primary goal is to profit off of us hating each other. I mean, it's just, it can't be like that. And yeah, I know. And it sucks. It sucks so bad that another thing he says in that video is that there are people, he's like, I know that this is this is largely symbolic. I live in a red state, and this is going to ruin my reputation with people that I like and respect for stupid, immature reasons. As if I haven't been reasoning this out and thinking about this for the last several years. And I resonate a lot with that, because it's like whenever people who've known me, especially that have known me for a long time, have always, considered me someone who, had somewhat of an informed opinion, that at least I thought thoroughly about things. Even before doing any of this stuff, I would have people ask me, what to think about this or that issue. And the idea that, I had honest, beliefs and opinions, and voted in a way that was, what I thought was the best idea with the information I had at the time. I don't regret voting for Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Barack Obama, because every single time I pulled the trigger for that person based on the information I had, and it was a thing that I did in good conscience, right? And this is the same. And that's all you can ever ask people to do, is to make the best decision with the information they have that they feel comfortable with, but to know that there are people who, thought that I was, well-informed or thoughtful or something, about things 4 years ago or 5 years ago or however long ago. But now we'll think that I've become some evil right-wing person or something, which isn't the case in either count, is really indicative of, again, what I think, the direct results of us being in these siloed realities of just fomenting hatred for each other. And that's what I'm really rejecting. Yeah, there are things that I like about Trump. I really don't think he's, like I said, nearly as bad as what the media paints him to be. But again, they do that to themselves by setting such a low bar for him too, that if you even step a little bit outside of their echo chamber, you're going to go, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. You know what I mean? So like, it's not like the bar was set very high for that for me, you know, like there's a good chance that if they would have just covered him honestly, that I would maybe not even be voting in this election, to be totally honest. Um, that if they were just honest about what they did, you know, I might not. Um, so yeah, but it's frustrating, and you shouldn't have to be, you know, again, to quote Barry Weiss, who I have multiple times for, when she says it shouldn't require bravery to go to work as a centrist in a major American publication. I don't think it should require any degree of like gumption or, you know, kind of like, okay, like, you know, take a deep breath and fortitude to say that you voted for the incumbent president, like the sitting president of the United States. Like that shouldn't require, like, people could disagree, but it shouldn't be controversial, you know? And so like that is the problem. That is the sickness that I think that we're seeing in our culture and how we treat each other. And so, you know, to what you said, you know, I totally agree. Yeah, people should go vote their conscience, and understand that if you did vote for Donald Trump, or if you're going to, that there is an asymmetry of good faith in a lot of ways, but you're not gonna combat that by mirroring it. Like there are people who I know, it's actually most people that I know who voted for Biden, you know, or will vote for Joe Biden. Um, and I totally understand that position because I was that person just a couple of years ago, right? So, like, I didn't make my mind up of voting for Trump until this year. It wasn't until 2020 that I thought I could maybe make that decision. So this has been a very gradual, like, thoughtful process for me, and it's because of that that I understand why people, you know, are going to vote the other way, and I don't have any, you know, ill will or anything for them. You know, there are some people that I think are doing it for reasons that they're radically misinformed. So one example would be young evangelicals that just got, you know, smacked upside the head with the race stuff over the summer, and that, you know, are just now learning about their culture. So they're just imbibing, you know, the whatever narratives are given. So they think that the president is some virulent racist, which is an idiotic and ludicrous proposition. Um, and they think that the Democrats are these like kind, you know, just, and they're fighting racism. No, but they're the anti-racist and they're the anti-fascists, you know, but they can't be fascist or racist if they're anti. Okay.
Language is a
Um,
hell of a thing.
like, yeah, exactly. Um, again, I can't remember who it was, but someone who I follow on Twitter said, I'm going to make a group called Anti Bad Things and just go around doing a bunch of evil crap. And then if people take issue with it, I'm going to say, wait back the name, like, no, I'm Anti Bad Things. How could you say that? Um, but anyway, but even those Christians who I think will be voting, like, what I'm not saying is you can't be a Christian and vote for a Democrat. I'm not saying that, because I was very much a Christian when I voted for Obama and for Hillary Clinton and for Bernie Sanders. What I'm saying is that I think that if that is their reasoning is flawed. But I understand it. But the broader point is that if you are a Trump voter, understand that there's going to be an asymmetry there of curiosity, of understanding. That doesn't make you morally better, and it doesn't make the other people stupid. But it does give you a challenge to rise to, and saying that I'm not going to mirror this back to someone. You know, kill them with kindness. I to to what we were talking about earlier, with there are these people in these rural areas who do seem like they want Antifa to show up at their farms. That, like, that's not going to win anyone over to your perspective. And maybe that's not what they're interested in. There's been people that I've encountered when I've asked questions about where they get these Trump landslide 2020 things, who that are on the right, who just treated me like I'm an idiot, and I'm like, I'm clearly more informed about this than you are. Like, I'm asking questions. Like, your example is that you saw a yard sign at a farm you drive by every day. Like, that's not every reasoning for Trump landslide because your neighbor is voting like you are. Like, that doesn't make sense,
But it was
So
a big sign.
but it was a big sign, right? And so it's just like the right has to, like, they have to understand the asymmetry, and not respond to it in kind. That's all. But I also think that they have to be vocal about their decision. I think that in a way, it's necessary for people to know, you know, like, I know that, I'm going to take flack from a lot of people for the way that I voted, but it's also good for people to be confronted with, like, you do have to make a decision about, like, do you really think that every person who votes differently than you is evil, right? Like, there are people who I am friends with that are, at this point, essentially communists in some ways. And, like, I think their ideas are awful, but I don't think they're evil, like, at all. Like, because I know what they like, their reasoning. They're like, no, I want people to just have healthcare. I want people to just be able to go to college. I want people to not be poor, not to pay so much for drug prices. Like, you're not evil for wanting those things. You're just really misinformed, about how to accomplish them. And so I think the people on the right have to have that understanding, especially right now, and have that humility that if he does win, there has to be grace and there has to be humility. And I think one thing Dave Rubin says that's really good is to make a big tent, have a big tent to invite people in, even if it's just building bridges of common humanity, not like saying come over to the right if that's where you happen to be. I actually think that's a bad pitch. I wouldn't want to do that personally, because I agree with Eric Weinstein that we should graduate from party politics that we have now. People need to be able to move past these binaries in a lot of ways. So, but yeah, I think what you said is right. People should vote. People should treat each other with respect no matter how they vote. And if you're a person who votes Trump, I think you need to speak up about it and be humble and be kind and understand that there are people that are going to treat you poorly, but there are other people they're going to have their eyes open to the fact that, oh, it's not all of them are evil. And the more that happens, the more people will see the common humanity of people they disagree with. And hopefully we can get to a place where we heal some of this stuff on a local level, and we, eventually don't have to make these kinds of choices, between, Joe Biden and the dude with the Access Hollywood tape who also happens to be perfect for right now. Like, what a bizarre, insane contradiction, but it's true. So anyway, good.
It's good.
Okay.
I like it.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. We're going to be doing an election live stream on Tuesday, so that'll be fun. We're going to have conversations with other people. We're lining some of that up, and I think it's going to be good. We're going to be imbibing and having discussions on some things I think are actually kind of interesting in terms of the future of the parties and some of our predictions. I think it'll be fun to play around the electoral college map to try to, game. I haven't messed with any of those, interactive ones, but I think it'd be fun to kind of game some of that out.
I did get to watch the was it New York Times one? Started out 99% Hillary. Just watch it slowly roll down toward Trump.
Oh yeah, dude, that one.
Great. Or watching the Young Turks watch that as it slides down and then slowly freak out.
Florida. They just called Florida. Whenever they called Florida, that's when they freaked out.
I've rewatched the Young Turks stream of 2016 election so many times because it's so enjoyable. It's so, I don't know if anyone watches Young Turks unironically, but
yeah,
man, they're entertaining. in an
Uh,
interesting way.
yes, they are. That one, what's her name?
Anna Kasparian.
Yeah, Anna Kasparian. Yeah. If you are a woman and you voted for this man, yeah, I hate you.
We'll
Anyway.
definitely try to throw them up on the stream. I'll try to keep them on YouTube and see if
Oh
we can
yeah,
go back to
we
them.
got to do
That'll be a
that.
good time.
That'll be good. Oh, yeah. Anyway, okay. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. If this kind of thing you're into, please follow Kevin on Engineering Politics. That's ENG_politics on Twitter. Not to be confused with English politics or England politics or anything like that. Engineeringpolitics.locals.com. He's on Medium. He's on ThinkSpot. I think he's going to be doing a live stream with one of these people he disagrees with. Potentially tomorrow or Monday was it Monday?
Tomorrow. It would
Tomorrow.
be.
So, okay.
Not decided if I'm going on there yet, but
okay. Well, I think you should. Anyway, but he's on ThinkSpot and has cool stuff on there. He has his own website, and he writes some really interesting articles. So I'd highly check that out. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter. That's at My Mundane Mind. YouTube. Oh, also Kevin's Engineering Politics on YouTube. YouTube, Return to Reason. Locals, returntoreason.locals.com. Medium, ThinkSpot, and did I miss any of the platform stuff?
Other than like Parler, like
I was gonna say, other than Parler.
If you get Twitter, you got Parler too. They're kind of similar. One and the same,
except
almost.
for one of them gets used and one of them doesn't get used.
not by much, no.
Seriously. I just meant by people generally. I mean, there's some people on Parler, but it's like, yeah. Anyway. So anyway, all right, that's it. I'm going to stop recording, everyone. We will see you on Tuesday, hopefully. And then also, we'll ring in the apocalypse together, regardless of what happens. So anyway, all right, peace out. Yeah,
bye.
Right. Peace.
All right, there it is. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Make sure to join the Return to Reason Locals community and show Truman some support. You can go to returntoreason.locals.com to support his locals community, and you can find him on ThinkSpot and YouTube by searching Return to Reason. You can also find him on Twitter at MyMundaneMind, and Truman also has written content that can be found on Medium.com. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I want to take a quick moment to share different ways you can help support this content. There are a few easy ways to do this. You can follow me on Twitter at ENG_politics. You can give me a follow on Parler at Engineering Politics. You can join the Facebook group named Engineering Politics, where I share and discuss content with the Facebook community. You can also subscribe to my video channel on YouTube under the channel name Engineering Politics, where you can find the video version of each podcast. I'm also active on ThinkSpot, which is a discourse-generating application that promotes intelligent, honest conversations while discouraging the trolling and nonsense found on most social media platforms. You can find all of my podcasts and videos on there as well. And now there's a new donation feature on my ThinkSpot page for those of you who follow me on there and also want to support this content. But the best way to interact with me, get my newest content, and support this podcast is the Engineering Politics Locals community. This is an amazing community that goes far beyond just a membership platform intermediary for creators. It allows the followers of this content to get together and discuss the newest articles, podcasts, and videos all in one place. I strongly urge you to join the Engineering Politics Locals community at engineeringpolitics.locals.com. You can become a member for free, and now you can get a 3-month free trial when becoming a subscriber if you use promo code EPFREE. That's spelled EPFREE, no spaces. I would love to have your support with your subscription so this content can remain independent and keep growing. Monthly subscriptions to the Engineering Politics Locals community start as low as $2 per month. I hope I can count on your support so I can continue to make high-quality podcasts and subscriber content. I appreciate your consideration. Let's build a community together. Thanks for listening. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast. None of the persons, podcasts, books, or other references other than engineering politics used in this work directly reflect my ideas and or personal beliefs, nor should they be held accountable for anything said during this podcast. Thank you for listening.